All right, we'll get everybody just sort of acclimated. Appreciate everybody taking a few minutes to join us this evening. We'll begin sort of just with some introductory stuff here with just sort of a welcome and getting acclimated. Hopefully y'all, well, obviously you've all made it into the meeting, so that's a positive. You'll be muted as you've noticed. You can provide comments and questions to us through the Q&A panel as is identified here in the lower right. With that, I think we'll go to the first sort of slide of any content, which is really talking about tonight's agenda, and then from there, and I'll turn it over to Mike. But the overview is really we're trying to give you some background and sort of a welcome, help explain some of the public-private partnership with an example. Specifically, we'll be looking at what Euclid did. We'll give you some examples of what this could look like along the lakefront. When we talk about lakefront public access, what does that mean? Then we're going to sort of give you the tools to do an online survey, which is due the 1st of March. It should take you about 10 or 15 minutes. It should not be too difficult. But we do have a number of really important questions. We'd love for you to participate not only tonight, but in that survey. So we'd ask you to do that. And then if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer those as well. Ultimately, our goal for tonight is to give you information that allows the residents of the county to provide feedback to guide where investment happens and how we provide access or enhance access to the lakefront. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike for some introductory sort of comments.
Hi, thanks, Jason. Really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Dever. I'm the Director of Public Works for Cuyahoga County. And on behalf of County Executive Armin Budish, I welcome you here tonight to discuss the Lakefront Community Access Plan. We have a number of people here that are with us. And first off, I'd like to introduce to you Mary Serby. She is our new Executive Director of the County Planning Commission. Jim Salter, he is our project manager for this project, and Patrick Hewitt. From our Smith group, Jason Stangland. Jason, why don't you introduce your folks there?
Sure. A couple of folks you'll see here. There's Neil's on with us tonight. Just if there's some questions about trails, we can certainly do that. Rob's not with us tonight, but Jake and I will be primarily running with it, and we're sort of at the helm of sort of the analysis and public process pieces. And we have some partners with Third Space and Evelyn and Trevor as well.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for the introduction. We're really happy that all of you have joined us tonight. This is not a project without your continued engagement, so I'm glad that you are all here with us tonight. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to Jim. Or Jason. Jason,
yeah,
sorry.
I changed the last minute slide. That's not your fault. So we're gonna start with a little bit of an exercise, and this is kind of a warm up. Well, I think since we've been talking here the past couple of minutes, we picked up about 40 to 50 people on this call. So that's great. I see that some other folks are joining us from the Bike Cleveland annual meeting as well. So that's wonderful. What I'm going to ask you to do is pick up your cell phone, or if you want to do it via your laptop, that's great. I find cell phone voting the easiest, which is really the right hand side here. You can do it by going to the web, or you can do it by texting. So we're going to do this a couple times throughout the night. Part of it is to help us understand who's participating this evening, so we get a better perspective on what you may or may not have an understanding of because of your background, and it just keeps it a little bit more interesting for everybody to stay engaged as well. So I'll give it another minute, but if you could choose, either do the left side here, which is join via the web. You can go to poll.com and just enter SG Chicago, and you can get in that way. Or if you go to the right-hand side and just text to this number 22333 SG Chicago, it'll say you're joining the survey. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to answer probably, I think, 5 questions throughout this. And I'll bring the slide up a couple extra times too. All right. So I'm going to move on, and then we'll move on to the first question I'm going to ask you. The first question is, what community municipality are you from? So where are we getting folks from? Right now we're about 250 people, and I'm curious where you're from. It'll let you respond, I think, a single time. If you answer the wrong one, I think you can clear it. Great. We've got a lot of good representation. Looks to me like east side of Cleveland has got a good lead there. So overall, though, we've got a pretty good mix. Great. Keep that handy. We'll ask you another question in a few minutes. Like right now. Are you a lakefront property owner? If you are, it's great to have you back. Some of this will be new. Well, there won't be a ton of new information, but it'll be told from a different perspective, but it'll be pretty consistent with what you've heard before. That's great. I'm thrilled to see the number of people who are probably new to the process. That's about 60% of you who haven't been engaged in this process to date, which is great. I think I got one more. I'm guessing the split will be similar to 60-40. Or maybe not. So that tells me there's a couple residents or lakefront property owners who weren't able to attend the previous lakefront property owner meetings, but you're here. We appreciate you taking time, and we'll cover things, and then hopefully you can pick up this video and the preceding videos on the website and review some additional information if you'd like as well. Right now, though, I'm going to switch over and just give you a quick introduction from County Executive.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about one of our region's most precious assets, our lake. Some months ago, I announced the Cuyahoga County Lakefront Public Access Plan. It's a comprehensive plan to build on our best asset, which is our lake. My vision is to create a walking and a biking path with a connected set of access points all along the lakeshore, from Euclid to Bay Village, which will provide better access to important Lake Erie assets for everyone. My overall goal is to enhance the quality of life for people along the entire 30-mile stretch of the Lake Erie shoreline. Doing this will positively impact the lives of Cuyahoga County residents, and it'll create economic development opportunities for the whole region. Having a stable, accessible lakeshore makes our region more inviting to people looking to come here and to live here and to work here, which makes our region stronger overall. Having an inviting lakeshore gives you even more ways to interact with our beautiful lake, and will build up the infrastructure in a way that's good for the environment. This project will also improve water quality, prevent erosion, provide slope protection, preserve natural resources, and safeguard our abundance of fish, wildlife, and habitat in Lake Erie. So that's the vision, and we're now in the process of gathering input from you, the public. We want to know what you want your lake to be, and what are your hopes and dreams and concerns. As the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission works to gather public input, I look forward to hearing what you have to say so that we can be sure to make wise and inclusive decisions. Our lake, it's so amazing, so unique. Let's work together to keep it that way and to make it even better for all of us. Thank you.
That gives a pretty good overview. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Thank you, Jason. It's a great overview. So I'd like to go through some of these goals for us here. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see such a huge crowd for a virtual public meeting. So our first goal is to create a connected network of lakefront access opportunities and assets. We have an abundance of existing city parks, Cleveland Metro Parks reservations, and public rights-of-way connecting them. But we also see a need where we can explore opportunities to create more public access points in partnership with private property owners. In doing so, we think we have it's a great way to leverage the lake as a county-wide asset because, as you know, current ownership and land use patterns just limit public access as things are right now. One thing that sets this study apart is we really seek to address shoreline erosion and protect private property. With these high lake levels, we know that they're rapidly eroding trouble spots that are impacting lakefront residents and some of our public assets as well. And through these shoreline protection measures, we have a great opportunity to enhance the health and safety of the lake by building shoreline protection measures that improve water quality, wildlife habitat, and public safety. So with that, next slide, I'm going to turn this over to Patrick Hewitt to talk about the planning efforts currently underway.
Thanks, Jim. Again, my name is Patrick Hewitt, and I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the other projects throughout the region that are happening along our lake. Of course, this plan is really aiming to improve public access along the entirety of the Cuyahoga County lakefront. And that includes both along the shoreline, public and private property, and up to that first major street, usually Lake Avenue or Lakeshore Boulevard. And there's really three components to this. Public access, improving both existing access points where needed and expanding public access points where possible. Erosion and ecological features. We know that high lake levels and climate change have taken their toll on the lakefront. So this project aims to repair and buffer against erosion in exchange for public access and improved transportation. And then transportation, specifically multimodal transportation between public access points, either on major streets or directly along the lakeshore. And this is being done in consultation and in close collaboration with our regional partner, NOACA. As you can see on this map, there are a number of other planning projects that are happening within Cuyahoga County and within the larger region. One of the first ones, Cheers, is being undertaken by the Cleveland Metro Parks, and they are working at the area where MLK Boulevard meets the lakefront. There is a Cheers public meeting next week, which we encourage you to attend as well. The Vision for the Valley plan looks at the area where the Cuyahoga River meets the lakefront and is a regional TLCI being undertaken by the city of Cleveland with NOACA. The Downtown TLCI is a project undertaken by the city of Cleveland, also with NOACA, to look at routes into and through downtown Cleveland. And the Community Confluence Plan is looking at the area where the Rocky River meets the lakefront and how connections can be made across that. The Cuyahoga County Public Access Plan aims to weave all of these pieces together into a comprehensive and cohesive plan for the entire county lakefront. At the same time, the regional lakefront TLCI being undertaken by NOACA is looking at the three-county region of Lake, Cuyahoga, and Lorain counties, and how all of those counties can also better access the lakefront. We're working with all of these groups to create a cohesive series of trails and access points throughout our region to get people to and from the lake. Jason, I'll turn that back over to you to continue.
Thanks, Patrick. So there's a lot that's already gone on, but at the same time, I would say we're actually at the beginning of the process. So I'll kind of go over this broadly, but I think what you probably see and that's sticking out is tonight's meeting, and it's really about the residents of the county getting their perspective about this important initiative. And we've focused tonight on trying to understand where we can enhance what exists and where we can better connect what exists. And I'll explain that in a little bit. We've actually also started some dialogue that happened back at the end of 2020 with regulatory agencies, a bunch of municipalities, some special interest groups, state and regional agencies. There's a lot of initiatives that are going on with this region. Just as Patrick spoke about, there's a lot of plans, but then there's other folks who are specifically concerned about whether it's water quality or fish species or all those types of things. We had a really good series of meetings, about, I'd say, 45 hours of meetings with folks about their perspective on things. But one of the other people and one of the other groups that's really important that we've started to engage in this process happened last week, and that was meeting with the shoreline property owners. We wanted to meet with them first because part of the public-private process of creating expanded public access is about finding where there's potential landowners who are interested in collaborating, so we can expand that public access along the lakefront. So it can't happen without them. At the same time, I want to be respectful to the process, or to their perspective on things, because there are some property owners who just simply don't want or don't need assistance in the back along the shoreline in order to stabilize the shoreline, and they're not interested in providing public access. We have to be respectful and honor that as well. So we've worked with them, given them voice, and we've given them an opportunity to fill out a survey that talks about their interest and receptivity to the idea of providing public-private access. So tonight, again, we'll go over similar types of things, but a little bit different content. One of the things, as I started to kind of hit on, that we heard from property owners was that they wanted to understand more about what this looks like. And so we had, I guess, about 28% of the overall lakefront property owners or lakefront properties had a survey responded. They were tied to the individual parcel numbers of those. So we had a pretty good turnout. We had about 150 to 200 people at those two meetings. Tonight, for those who are interested, we're about 300. But what we heard from the property owners themselves was to understand what will it look like, and they got into a lot of questions about their specific property, and I said we can't get into that at the moment. We will as we move forward, because this is the beginning of that process. But it was interesting to me that we heard a lot of good feedback about what will it look like on my property, which says there might be some interest in a public-private partnership in those areas. We heard also a lot about the fact that the east and west bluffs, and so we're going to talk about Euclid, for example. It's probably a 25 to 30 foot bluff. It's very different from a geological standpoint than the west side. It's much more of a sheer shale bluff, and on the east side it moves to more sand and clay bluff. Both are somewhat unstable from the geotechnical investigations that were done to look at that. So there is, however, some difference between those two, and it's important to acknowledge that because it may have differences in how we respond from a design perspective. There was a lot of questions about who's going to pay for what, and who's funding what, and who's going to be responsible for the permits and the easements and agreements, and those are great questions. Again, they're leading down the path of let's continue to have a dialogue, which I think is a positive place to be. And then there was a lot of back and forth discussion, and we've received a lot of comments about how do you balance public and private interests. And so for the lakefront property owners, we had one of the residents who lived along the lakefront in Euclid, or lives along the lakefront in Euclid, and he explained a little bit about his perspective and perception about it. We'll go over some of those details tonight as well. But that's generally what we heard from those folks. But what, again, are we looking to get from you? And the county executive spoke a little bit about that. But we want to understand what access points or parks, lakefront points along each of the communities that you're representing should be better connected. And if we can understand that, we can start to look for, are there owners that are willing to allow for public-private partnership between those 2 points? And so that's one of the areas, one of the questions we want to focus on. What type of improvements and activities do you really enjoy doing along the lakefront? And I've seen some comments and questions about there are some beaches that are along the shoreline. Can we either recreate or can we preserve or maintain? Yeah, those are all things that are great to talk about, and some of the topics we'll chat about or ask questions about in the survey. And then we want to understand a little bit more about what hurdles are limiting your use or access to the lakefront. Is it distance? Is it not decent crossings to get across the street? What are those things? So those are some of the highlights we're hoping to get from you. And so we'll ask you a couple of questions tonight, but we're hoping that you'll all take the opportunity to go to take the survey as well. So as I spoke about, there's a number of things that have already occurred in terms of the process, and some of it is just understanding what exists along the shoreline. And so we had an opportunity to look at 30 miles of shoreline, maybe 5-6 months ago at this point. And that tour was really informative, included a few members from our team, a geotechnical engineer, coastal engineer, and myself, looking at those conditions to understand where is there bluff instability, where is there not. So we took imagery along the whole shoreline. You can see some of the conditions. I mean, these are more west side images, and everything from Rocky River Park, which has been laid back and stabilized, to the Gold Coast that's got more vertical bluffs that still is eroding down at the toe of the bluff, even though you have Great Lakes Armor units, and you can see some of that slumping in the far distant portion of that image. And then, over Bay Village, it's much more of a sheer vertical bluff. It's a little bit different in some areas where it's actually being undercut at the toe. On the east side, we're seeing a little bit different condition. So down here is over by 260th and Euclid, and then Cleveland at Lakeside Place, east side residents. This is sort of maybe in your neck of the woods, maybe where Northeast Ohio Sanitary District has a couple outfalls through that zone. So certainly one of the things we focused on is understanding what the coastal conditions are. Another thing with it, which I think, Patrick, you spoke about well, was the importance of this meshing and merging with what exists and other plans that are in place, right? And so you can see some of the things here that we've got, Solstice steps, that we want to make sure we can blend with and work with. We've got Bay Village, Cahoon Park, that area here. Where there's a plan that exists already. In Rocky River, they're going under construction for their pier. And I think that's important to understand that those plans exist and that there's an opportunity to build on what's happening in those zones as well as other places. So on the east side, you've got Irish Town Bend, a significant investment that has an opportunity to create a tremendous amount more public access. You've got the Euclid project, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and then Cheers project, which is an opportunity to create better access and connections down to the lakefront on the east side of Cleveland there. So one of the pieces that we're hoping that you can give us feedback on is really, I guess, one of the vehicles we're hoping you can use is actually through this online survey, so the SurveyMonkey link, and we'll post this video and those links on the county's website, and you'll be able to get to it right here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But basically, we're hoping to get your input, as I spoke about earlier, on some of those key questions. So with that, I'm going to ask you one other, I think a couple other little questions here. So let's hear a little bit more from you. So if you missed it earlier, we're going to ask you to kind of type in, if you want to text to 22333 SG Chicago, or you can go to the web and you can do another round of voting there. You can go to pollev.com and enter SG Chicago and do it that way, or you can use your phone and do it web-based if you want, or you can text vote, either way. I'm going to give you a second because there's a bunch of new people on since the last time we tried this. So Mary probably already knows the next question, so she's going to put in the answer quick before I switch the slide. But all right, hopefully you've got that. We've got one more round after this, so we'll go ahead and move on to the Poll Everywhere slide here. So let's find out a little bit more about what you like to do. So what's your primary activity when you visit the lakefront? Everybody goes to the lakefront, I'm seeing. That's a good thing. I mean, that suggests that it's an important amenity. So given what I'm seeing here, and maybe it's a overgeneralization, but it sounds like that's part of, these are sort of activities of more daily life stuff, is sort of what I'm sensing. That's great. All right. What would make you want to visit the lakefront more frequently? Would it be better public transportation? Would it be better connections for walking or biking? Is it just that there's no good access point near you, and if you had one closer to you, you'd be using it all the time? Does it feel welcoming or safe? You're on the lakefront meeting, so it's also a good thing that nobody's saying you're not interested in visiting the lakefront. So that's good. That's positive. So better connections is a big thing. Clearer connections, great. Now, I've asked you a couple of questions tonight, and we'll ask you at least one more coming up here. But I do think it's important, I'm going to ask you to don't think that your responses tonight are the end of it. I'd like to hear more from you, so please take that survey. And we'll put that link up a little bit more in a moment. All right. So we talked a little bit about the fact that we're at an early point in the process, and there's the planning process that the county is undertaking at this point, and then there's the process in totality, which means I figure out what the issues are, what the opportunities are, and then I figure out how to build it. Well, we're not quite there yet, albeit the county would like to move very quickly to getting something built, because I think it's really important to affect the lives of those who are on the call and those who live within the broader community. But what we're really looking at is this orange section over here. This is where we're looking at creating a roadmap for the overall process that ultimately becomes something that gets built. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. And if I said it happens in 2 years, that would be a quick time frame, because there's a permitting process that I'll get into that does take some tremendous amount of time. So if we just look at this first section, this little section of the whole process, really there's three main steps, and we're in that first step, as we spoke about, is understanding those existing conditions. We've spent a fair bit of time talking about that. We want to understand where landowners have some level of interest in participating and engaging to expand public access along the lakefront in exchange for protected shoreline. And then we're understanding your perspectives tonight. And so we're hoping that between understanding the conditions, understanding what landowners are interested in, and understanding what the community wants, we can come together and find some opportunities and explore some opportunities that are easy, simple changes. Maybe it's just adding a better crosswalk in this location, or a different signage or things like that. That's great. But then there's also some more optimal things. So as the county executive spoke about, maybe it's making more of the public access actually occur along the lakefront. And so we're going to look at options that are more continuous lakefront access. We're going to look at some where maybe you just pop in and out to the lake along some of those existing paths and existing access points. Those will all be explored during this process, and then ultimately we'll be coming back to the community and to the lakefront property owners, talking about a plan that is for the overall 30 miles. But ultimately, our goal is just have that 30-mile plan, but know that it's important to show some progress. And so that's really where we're hoping to have 2 to 4 focus areas along the lakefront that represent initial wins and initial investments that can be transformative. And so, again, long-term vision with something that can be built in the relatively near term. And I say relatively near term back to that discussion of process and permitting. So let's talk a little bit about the model and where this all sort of started. And if you're familiar with, at least I saw a few people here are from Euclid. And so that's a good opportunity to say this is their vision, right? It's 3/4 of a mile of public access. It is in the process of being built. It looks at expanding beaches with habitat and cobble beaches that EPA prefers versus some of the sandy beaches. It looks at providing private and public access, and so there's a couple staircases and things that are actually from their private associations, and there's some balancing of private and public interest in that case. And it all really began with this pier that was implemented on the west side of this, the right side of this vision. And so they've got I'd say half of this built at this point, and then the far east half, or the left half in this image, because I've changed the direction of things, that's under construction right now and should be complete next year. So the last one, I promise, so again, let's see, we've got about 8 new people here. So if you haven't tried this before, again, you can do a text, or you can do via web voting. You can either text 22333. You can text SG Chicago to that number, and that'll get you into the poll. So I'm going to flip forward and ask you the one simple question, which is, have you been to Euclid and are you familiar with the project? So have you visited it before? A, are you familiar with it but never visited, or are you not familiar at all? So it looks like we've got a bunch of people who have some knowledge of it, but overall, I would say people who haven't been there in person or aren't familiar with it at all are really about 50% or a little more than 50% of the crowd, and that's good. That you'll get some opportunity to learn tonight, but I'd encourage you to take a walk out there, because it does open your eyes. The beaches that are there were never there. Well, they were back in the 60s, but that's a separate discussion. So this is sort of Euclid, and I'll give you a quick overview of it, and then we'll kind of give you some more details of it. But it started because there was very limited public access. They only had 6% of their shoreline open to public access. And if you look at today in the county, there's only, I think it's over 90% of the shoreline or lakefront is privately owned. And so, there's some limitations with access. That's great for those who have the ability to live along the lake, but are there ways that we can expand public access? And that's what Euclid started looking at, is can we make those connections? And so Sims Beach was one of the major connections, but all this whole section of shoreline was heavily eroding, and you see that actually in other sections, even on the west side where it's shale. Not only was this project about stabilizing the slopes, and we heard a lot from some of the private landowners about the importance of doing that, and they could use some help with that, and they were willing to give up some public access in exchange for shore protection. But they also were looking at this as an economic development tool, and I think the county executive spoke about the importance of this as being something that is economic tool. It's about a lifestyle and a quality of life type of issue. It's about health from a people and fish and plant perspective. So a variety of different perspectives. And really this came down to, and it's something you guys have all probably seen, or a lot of you have seen, is in 1949, this top image, there was about 150 foot deep beach. In 19 years, that beach eroded, went away, and it's not water level. We looked at that, and it's actually because of changes that happened along the shoreline updrift or to the west of this section, and so that the sand that we once had in the system that fed these beaches doesn't exist anymore. So there's not the ability to just say leave it alone, don't muck with it. We've mucked with it enough that it's changed the dynamics of the shoreline, and it's not just here; it's throughout the entire county. So what you're familiar with in a lot of instances, and for Euclid's shoreline, is people dumping concrete and rubble and debris, and that debris gets pulled off into the lake, and it's not a good thing. There's rebar and there's all kinds of things in there, and it's not exactly the best for the lake, and certainly not all that good for use. There was an association, and Joe Martin, who was one of the residents in Euclid, spoke about this, is that they had a little bit of an access. You can see that sort of thing is bent a little bit. Well, that's their access and private access. We actually worked with them to maintain and actually enhance their private access, and at the same time accommodate public access. And so that was a really important thing. So we had a bunch of different variable conditions along the shoreline. We did a lot of testing, and this is built in a physical modeling lab that's about the size of a soccer field, and it changes water levels and wave direction and all these things to look at the conditions. And so we did those tests to understand the dynamics and make sure that what we built there would work. And so ultimately the plan ended up to be something similar to what's shown on the bottom here, with ultimately a development of a marina as part of their plan, assuming funding comes in for that. But what you can sort of start to see here on the right-hand side is what the vision was in graphics becomes something that is becoming built and implemented. And so some of those coastal erosion areas, and if you're familiar with it and you live along the lake, you know what I'm talking about when I say a coastal erosion area. That is state designated. Those coastal erosion areas we had to address, manage, and work with. But ultimately, it's something that roughly 100 homeowners signed on to make happen. And so the yellow in the lower left are all privately owned parcels where there's public access permitted across the lakefront. In a couple instances, there were parcels that were actually donated to the city to allow for it. In other instances, they had all the homeowners along within this association sign an easement agreement that allowed for public access in exchange for a protected shoreline. So you can see that progress and the results that they're getting in terms of some cobble beaches. This is midway through construction, so there's some debris in this location, but people are using it, and it's not even complete. And this is sort of what led people to see this as a very viable model for not only the Cuyahoga County, but throughout the Great Lakes. And so what's happening is there's a lot of interest in how we can collaboratively do this, because when you start looking at shore protection, it's really expensive, and there is so much interest in getting access to the lake. And just by tonight's responses, I can see that there's a lot of interest in using the lake, because you all do right now. And there was a lot of discussion about this particular topic, and we won't go into it too much tonight, but here's one example of how you can get a public and a private access to work together. So here's your public walkway, and here's your private overlook, and there's a gate and a lock mechanism, and everybody can go down to this beach, but they can't get up to this patio or plaza space. And so there's this balancing of public and private rights and interests. And so we worked with the landowners to look at maintaining the bluff, this line right here. In a lot of instances, we couldn't pull it back. And I've heard from a lot of property owners, particularly on the west side, we've got a shale bluff. Our buildings are right at the top. What can we do? And in a lot of instances, that's actually similar in terms of proximity of the bluff to buildings and structures in Euclid. It's a lot different response in terms of from a soil standpoint or a stone standpoint, but these were some of the big goals that we were trying to do. Again, stabilize the bluffs, enhance public access, create habitat, protect the health of the lake itself. And these were all, again, big goals that we tried to achieve. And so a lot of native plantings, a lot of different things like that help give you a different perspective of what this place could be. So when we talk about public access and what could it look like, there's a myriad of things. I can't answer the question about what will it look like at this location at the end of 117th. I don't even know if there's access there at 117th. But you could look at it and you could say, well, it could be any number of things, right? It could be staircases that are supported. This is just bluff access, for example. It could be trails that switch back, like these here, large staircases. It could be something like that. It could be something where you have a very different experience, and this is an example in the lower right of a bluff that's about 130 feet tall with a couple headlands and cobble beaches and basically a walkway along it. It's called Sylvan Beach. You can look it up, or Sylvan Park, sorry, just outside of Toronto, east of Toronto. A little bit more rustic than I think others might be thinking, but how do you deal with a large bluff that's inverted? You can see some pictures of it that are pretty amazing online. Just different examples. You can do steel sheeting, you can do stone in front, you can do beaches, you can do cobble, you can do a variety of different things of how that interface works. It doesn't have to look exactly like what Euclid does. You can have gathering spaces. You can have these great staircases that intersect with switchback trails and create beaches and areas for people to use. You could have overlooking decks, and as we were taking our tour of the lakefront, we could see a lot of overhanging decks or things of that nature. Probably not this exact lower left image without some serious wave protection in it, but it can take on a variety of different spaces, places, and uses that I think are really dynamic. And again, none of the images that we're showing here are exactly right. And you can take and walk Euclid, and you're going to say, well, this doesn't exactly work for my condition and or where I would like to see public access. And you're probably right, because none of them, they're all kind of custom little things. They're not, this is what it's going to look like at this moment. And again, I can't answer that because we're not at that point in the process, but there's a lot of different activities. It can integrate with boating. We've done a number of projects that integrate with paddlecraft as well, and beach access and things of that nature. So just a lot of different ways to use, get to, and get along the shoreline. So just a little bit more that I'll go over here before we get to sort of how you guys plug in tonight. Again, we talked about this roadmap, this overall strategy for 30 miles with a focus on a couple key areas. Well, again, it's something that if we're all working together on, we can actually get built. And that was, it took Euclid a good long time, but that was primarily for permitting and funding reasons. But what we need to do is create a continuous momentum towards something great that is transformative along the lakefront. So I joke about it as a marathon, not a sprint, because what I think is important is that it's going to ebb and flow, right? It takes 14 months. An example of Euclid, it took 14 months to just permit that project, and so it does take some time, and it's because of all these various agencies who are concerned about or protecting the resources the right way. And so there's a lot of different hands involved in that process. So I want to reinforce the importance of continuing to stay active, involved, and engaged as we move forward in this process. We talked about this overall process and getting to 2 to 4 focus areas. The hope is that, let's say, if all the ducks fell in a row or everything fell into line, we could say within 24 to 30 months, perhaps we could be at a point where we could actually be figuring out what we're going to move forward with first. That would be a great goal. And I guess as we talked about, and Jim, you spoke about at the onset of this, is the county executive had some really good goals for what they were trying to achieve, as we talked about. But what I think equally important when I start to look at it from a different lens, which is a coastal lens of processes and things like that, addressing coastal erosion or public access on a parcel by parcel scale, it really isn't ideal for anyone. It doesn't create enough interest for me to use the next, to get one more parcel or access. The more we can string these together, the easier I can address issues of coastal erosion, and the easier we can actually create a transformative project that seeks or is interesting to funding agencies because of its ability to do restoration and recreation and address things like ecology. Those all help once we start to look at a project in scale. And then I think that another important thing is understanding that there is this balance, and that's why we had two separate meetings. We've had the lakefront property owners, and we've had the meeting we're having tonight to talk about sort of the 2 different perspectives about what needs to be improved so we can identify where the investment should go, which is really you guys tonight, versus where the property owner is interested in partnering. And that you have to have both perspectives, and that's really important to have throughout this process. So again, I think we're going to be asking you to give us some great input. And so there's a survey link right here. We'll be using SurveyMonkey. Gives you a lot of good questions that help you understand things like this. Is just an example from the survey. This is identify, and these are all parks along here, A through N, lakefront parks that exist. Which of these would be better connected with multimodal transportation links such as trails, bike lanes, sidewalks, and other things? Which stretch is most important to connect? So is it over here on the west side? Is it more towards downtown? Is it farther on the east side? So for this example, it's Huntington Reservation and Cahoon Park to Columbia. How important is that on a scale of 1 to 5? Maybe you don't care. I'm guessing there won't be a whole lot of people who check that box, but how important is it to you? And that's probably the point, is how important is it to you? And so maybe downtown, maybe that's more where you're interested in, and you find that there's a tremendous amount more value in making this connection in through here. So we'd like to get that understanding because we want to understand if there were owners in between each of these zones. And I don't know if there are at this point because we haven't analyzed that data, but we'd like to understand if there are owners in between those zones where we might be able to actually link these things up better. So it's, again, that what's your perspective and what are the property owners interested in doing? So there's a lot of good opportunities and a lot of good information I just threw at you, but a lot of opportunities to give input. It starts with the survey, and then you can ask questions right on the county's website. And so I guess before we sort of open it up, Mike, I guess, is there anything you'd like to kind of remind us of, or that we didn't clearly hit on that would be good topics to touch on?
All right. Yeah, Jason, you really did an outstanding job of laying it out of the vision, at least from the county executive standpoint. You know, we're very excited to move forward with providing greater public access to the lakefront. The county executive, this is one of his priorities, this initiative, and which is really great to know. I mean, each community I know has been working on individual projects maybe over the last 30, 40 years or so. But the ability of the county to join in on this and now and try and link this together for here in Cuyahoga County. And then the larger project, which we're collaborating with NOAC on, which includes the two counties next to us here. You know, we're at a moment in time here, and I think it's really important that we all try and group together here and try and make something happen. So outside of that, Jason, you really you laid it out really nicely, and hopefully we'll get some great input on where we go from here.
And I would just like to add again, like, kudos to the whole team. I know we're not answering all the questions that we get tonight. This is really, as Jason said earlier, the beginning of this process. We need the input. I also want to say that it's a partnership. We're not out to take anybody's property. I think it was said early in the beginning that this is truly a partnership, and these access points might look different in various sections throughout the different communities. Some may be on major thoroughfares to the south of the lakefront and not always be up against the lakefront. And so there's not one thing that's going to work in every section of this project, but we really need the input, and we appreciate you guys sticking with us through this. So we've got some great, I think we're almost over 300 people on here tonight. So we're really excited to have this kind of input.
So as it looks like a lot of you have found, which is great, the Q&A button here, and that's wonderful. And if you think of questions after this, and we'll be posting this on the next couple of days, if you think of questions after this, you can always give input through the website, the county's website, as we spoke about in the previous slide on this one. You can just put in your comment question here. And on the survey, certainly we appreciate you taking time to do that. But if you'd like to kind of give your thoughts or some questions initially to sending it to all panelists would be helpful. We'll do our best to answer a number of them. I've seen a few of them. Jake, I'm going to ask you to unmute, or others to unmute, and at least sort of touch on some of the highlights of common themes. Are there some common themes I'm seeing? I guess one initial one that I'll hit on is that there's, as we spoke about, there's public and there's private lands, and so I've seen a couple people speak about, they're members of a beach club, and they may not want to open up access for everybody. That's the association's choice, not anyone else's. So if you choose to say no, then the answer is there probably won't be expanded access in through that zone. I mean, that's so you'll see some, and you can go the frequently asked questions. There's no intent on coercing anybody. It's really about what opportunities are there to be collaborative. So, Jake, do you have any initial thoughts or initial perspectives that we're seeing common themes?
Sure. Yeah, we have several questions. First one, kind of an overarching question of the entire project is, what are the benefits to individual landowners and, giving up their land to do this project? What benefit would they see essentially?
Sure. Well, there's a couple. I'll answer that through a couple lenses, and I'll ask anyone else to comment as well. There's the lenses are we have a number of residents who spoke about in our last public meetings the importance of or the cost associated with protecting the shoreline, and it being a huge hurdle. We're seeing costs that are in some instances, $2,500 a foot, up to $5,000 or $7,000 a foot for stabilization of the bluff, depending upon your section and where you are and how high the bluff is and all that other stuff. And so there's a huge cost and effort associated with time and permitting of a project like that, and then the actual construction and maintenance of it. So there's a big significant component there in terms of maintenance and construction and just the ease of that process that could be accomplished through a collaborative effort. The other Joe, if I were channeling Joe, who is here from the city of Euclid, he would probably look at it from the standpoint of protecting the value of his property. Not necessarily increasing it, but he would have a huge liability on his hands if this wasn't addressed, because he can't fix it on his individual parcel. It's his neighbor's parcel where the biggest issue was. And so by doing this collaboratively, that's an opportunity to I guess save some costs. If I flip my switch on the other side, what's the benefit for the public? Unless there is some public benefit, there's no interest from the federal, state, or any other level in investing in shore protection. This isn't shore protection for shore protection's sake. It's really a partnership that each group is getting something out of public access in exchange for shoreline protection. Jake, does that sound like it answers your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so what if there's a lot of people in support in a certain area, but there's a few that aren't and quite possibly hold out? What impact or what does that mean for the project?
That's a great question. Something that we dealt with in Euclid. I think it's a dialogue about what the concerns are with those landowners. I can't. We had the question posed a different way. If there were 20 property owners, this was a week ago, 20 property owners are in a row and one in the middle isn't interested. What does that mean? It's variable depending upon the size of the parcels and what's next to, and whether or not there's an interest by the public in investing in that reach or that stretch. I mean, if it's not connected to any other thing, it doesn't make sense to have 10 properties that have no left or right, west or east connection. It's just 10 properties that have a public trail along them that can't come back to a public road or right of way, that can't create multimodal access. So it's variable, I guess, to answer your question most directly, Jake. It's probably variable depending upon the specific situation and how many properties we're talking about. But generally, the intent is to work with those who are most interested in collaborating.
Okay. So let's imagine for Euclid, for instance, it's been built, it's constructed. Who maintains this? Who's responsible for litter, vandalism, and how do you go about sort of securing it and possibly limiting the public's access to private land?
I think that's. I'll give you the Euclid case and say that there's caveats in it. To all this, right? So one of the big things is in Euclid, they treat it like any other park. It closes at sunset, so you're not supposed to be down there after that point for people who are the general public. You're a landowner. You maintain ownership of the underlying land. If you want to walk down and get down to the shoreline like you could have before, that's your choice. So there's a lot of flexibility. The variability depends upon the municipality, and those are really specific discussions that you have to negotiate with each individual municipality and with each of the individual landowners. There's different concerns in each of those scenarios, but in general, you're going to deal with details of how you manage access, what are your specific, who's maintaining what. In Euclid, the maintenance goes all the way to the top of the bluff because we felt that it was important that in order for the shoreline to be stable long term, that the vegetation be managed correctly, that if there are coastal improvements that are along that shoreline, that they were the ones investing in that and then maintaining it long term. Not to say there aren't volunteer groups and organizations that shouldn't be involved in those as well.
So, Jason, how do you go about paying for something like this? Does any of the financial burden fall upon private property owners?
In the case of Euclid, the majority of the property was actually, there was some donated property, and then in most instances it was easements over the top. No compensation exchange for that. It was just something that was paid for by the municipality, and actually it was paid for in large part by the various investments from state and federal and local partners, and the county was one source of assistance through that. The casino revenue funds were used to help implement some of it. So it's variable, but in general, the intent is if it's singular in focus, meaning it only accomplishes access, that's fine. But if it starts to do other things, like it addresses water quality and it starts to enhance habitat and starts to do all these other things, then your pot of or your ability to potentially tap into other pots of funds grows. So I'd say that in general, the general rule in this, or the general approach has been in the past, is that the entity, being the county or the city or the public entity, is really coming to the table with the resources, and they're looking for the partnership really about providing access and the easements to allow for that access to occur. So I'm hearing a strong theme from landowners. Are there some comments or questions that we're hearing from people who may not have the ability to live along the lake?
Yeah, I have a question here. I think it's a really astute question. There's a lot of focus on the waterfront and connecting and making the waterfront accessible. In this plan, is there any consideration given to existing public spaces, as well as opportunity for new public spaces to the south, like south of 90, for instance?
Yeah, I think I'll give an initial sort of response, and I'm going to ask Mary or Jim or perhaps Patrick to give some initial or additional supplemental thoughts. But I think that's part of this is understanding what we can. Who's responsible for what, and how are we collaborating with other partners? And so NOACA's TLCI, that's really looking at the Tri-County area, is really focusing on Lake Road or Lakeshore Boulevard inland. Now, it's important that we understand that and understand how those connections feed into this process. And so they're going to be having some additional public meetings that really focus on that piece. But that is sort of we can't focus everywhere, so we're really taking a deep dive into the shoreline and sort of the first shore parallel main road there. But that's really important, is to understand those connections, where people are coming from. I guess, anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure, Jason. Connections are really what is going to make this effort successful. And a couple of plans that have been completed. One is the Cuyahoga Greenways Plan, which looks at active transportation, bicycling and walking connections all across the county, but especially how we can use active transportation to better connect to parks, better connect people to work and to their neighbors. And another piece of this that's certainly water-based is the recently or ongoing Lake Erie Water Trail project, which talks about paddlecraft and how can we have these paddlecraft access points in existing metro parks, existing city parks, from one end of the county to the other.
Thanks, Jim.
We may have a coastal engineer on the call tonight.
Super.
It's a really interesting question. I'm just going to read it. Littoral drift is interrupted by piers extending into the lake. Are there bypasses for nearshore sand around these suggested piers, or any sort of structure that extends out into the water? The construction and maintenance of these piers are costly, and does the city budget this?
Yeah, so in any project, that's probably one of the bigger concerns for permitting agencies is longshore transport, and so that's part of the physical model study. But it's actually more broadly understanding that sand does generally move west to east along the stretch of shoreline, albeit it does move both directions, but the predominant movement's west to east. So yeah, I think understanding that and how you manage that, do you bypass, do you backpass? Those are all things that depend probably on what the solution is. So are there piers? I don't know if there are piers in this particular project. I think in Euclid's case, they have a pier that exists right now. There's one at Euclid Beach as well. I assume that one's undergoing monitoring. I know the one that Euclid did, it was designed in such a way to naturally bypass, and it was monitored for a period of 5 years, and the Army Corps felt that they were comfortable with that. I'm sure the same thing's happening over at Euclid Beach with the pier that's there. So yeah, those are great points and technical things to get into. But I think it depends upon the design solution, and sort of the further out you go. I think the person's right. The further out you go, the more implications that has on the natural processes.
Jason, would it be possible to sort of capture a project timeline? And let me rephrase this. Could you sort of quickly provide a synopsis of the overall project in terms of sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions that are very specific to property owners, and they want very specific details on specific sites. And so we will get into that. Can you sort of explain the process on how that'll unfold?
Sure. I think that's probably for even coming out of the preceding week's meetings with the lakefront property owners, that the fun part of this is that everybody is concerned about their specific property and lakefront section, which is great, and you should be. That's not a fault by anyone, but where we're at in the process is trying to understand where there's even interest in looking at a public-private partnership. So if you said that your property, you're not interested in public-private partnership for bluff stabilization or shoreline stabilization in exchange for public access, the answer is then it doesn't look any different than what does today. If it does, then if you're thinking maybe you're going to respond to the survey that's out there for the lakefront property owners with, maybe I need more information, or yes, the answer is we need to have those dialogues. But, at first I need to understand is I've got 30 miles of shoreline, and there's a lot of properties along that whole stretch. And so we're not going to be able to invest in all of them into the same level of effort. So we're going to have to identify where there's some level of interest. And we won't get everybody to respond to a survey, but we'll hopefully identify. And I'm going to go up to the image right here. In the case of Euclid, we had a few different landowners here respond that they were interested, and they've actually had a survey of that entire lakefront within the city, that 4-mile lakefront, of 150 owners, and they've had 50 people who have said, I'm interested, but I need more information, like what's it going to look like, who's going to maintain what, who's going to do this, that, or the other thing. Great. All I can get to right now is, are you interested in continuing a dialogue? And there'll be a ton of details come forward later. So, Jake, it probably doesn't answer your question the best in that everybody wants to understand that for this specific property at this specific location. But all I can say is that step one is to figure out, are you interested? Step two is the public interested in having access in that location if the landowner is interested? And then if we have both of those things align and we have erosion, then there's an opportunity. And if we don't have those, if we have one of those three that doesn't sync up, meaning there's no erosion, you don't have a project, meaning that the landowners aren't interested, there's not a project. The residents and the community more wholly don't want to access that stretch or don't see that there's a need, then you don't have a project. So it's really three different lenses, and so I guess we're at the early point, and you have to have some patience, I guess. It's kind of how that goes.
Yeah, I just received a really good question that would like a little bit of clarification on shoreline ownership. Just wanting to explain the shoreline ownership and why it's not necessarily a public right.
Yeah, basically, it's the simple way I can go about it. And I don't know if I have a good picture here from Euclid. Yeah, this will probably do. Yeah, this will work. That's fine. So I'll try and describe it. Basically, there's a line that is defined as in the lake, or right at the toe of the bluff in most instances, that defines public interest, meaning waters of the state versus private property. And what actually happens in most instances is private landowner property rights extend out into the lake, meaning they have riparian interests, means lakefront property owner interests in if they wanted to put a boathouse or a pier or any number of things, they can do that because they have the ability to do that. They have to get a permit, but they can do that. And so having that I guess it varies by state, but in Ohio, basically the simple version is that wherever the water line touches the bluff today, that's kind of roughly the defining line between public and private. And even in that instance, even though there's water and technically I could walk on it, there's riparian interests that say I can't stop you, or I need to allow the private landowner to put in a pier if they want for a boat access or a boat house or anything like that. So it's not in other states. There's some other regulations that mandate a setback from a certain distance from the ordinary high water mark or something like that. Ohio's a little bit different. So there's no by right situation in this example, other than those public access points that currently exist, like Cahoon Park or Rocky River, Bradstreet's Landing. Any of those obviously are public, but nothing along the shoreline across private property. Did that answer your question, Jake?
Yeah. Yes. So when you describe multimodal access, does that mean walking paths and bicycling paths?
Yeah,
that's a lot to that.
I think that's primarily a lot of it, and we think the format, and I'll let Mike, maybe you have some good perspective on this too, but we've talked with residents about the importance of better connecting the lakefront parks and assets, and it could be anything from like what they're doing on Lake Avenue, where they're putting bike facilities on, or potentially putting bike facilities on the road that would connect these gems along the lakefront, versus a multimodal path or a path like this along the lakefront and Euclid. So I guess I don't know if anyone else has thoughts about defining multimodal, but typically we limit that to bike, pedestrian, rollerblade, type stuff.
Right. I would agree with you, Jason. I think that's how we're looking at it right now. And the other piece to this is those north-south connectors, those key routes that are coming from the south up towards either Lake or Lakeshore Boulevard or Clifton Boulevard, is try and see what type of enhancements are needed on those. That'll be more part of the NOACA analysis also. But we're looking it's a comprehensive plan we're trying to come up with. In the short term, there has been some improvements over the last few years here. In the community I live in here, Lakewood, they've restriped and reconfigured Lake Avenue so it's slowed down the traffic and, put a bike path basically on the road there. I know the city of Cleveland is looking at an improvement right now along Lake Road, also between Detroit and West 117th. That should be underway sometime this summer. Over on the other side of town on Lakeshore Boulevard, they've done some improvements there, and they have some additional improvements planned on that road. So we're looking at all of those, as well as out in Bay Village and Rocky River. So it's an exciting time, but I really look at it as really bike, pedestrian, rollerblade type of thing. So thanks, Jason.
Yeah,
So erosion is happening really fast in some of these areas. I have a homeowner here that has started to take some action. Is there any way to get reimbursed on that? Is there any way to work, if they have engineering drawings, to work those drawings into the plan?
We've had a similar type of question at the Lakefront landowners meetings that we had last week. The questions I would have to ask the following questions, probably in this order. It sounds like they've been designed by somebody who knows what they're doing. That's a great starting point. Number two, is there any benefit to beyond the protection of the shoreline? If the answer is no, then the answer is probably not. Does it incorporate potential for public access in some way, and could it be retrofitted or worked with? I think there's potential for discussion on that, but I think the majority of what we're seeing is people dumping rocks along the shoreline. And it sounds like this might be a different situation because they might actually have some engineering behind how they're sizing the structures and things like that. But in general, it's going to have to include some other benefit, particularly related to public access to fit within the wheelhouse of maybe potentially fitting in something that's reimbursable.
So the west side differs from the east side. The west side being shaly cliff, that's steep. What are some of the erosion control methods for the two different situations?
There's a lot of different examples. Euclid's one example. I'll leave it here for now rather than flipping. In general, you can create beaches, which depending upon your bluff stability, if your bluff is inherently stable but your toe is not, meaning where the water sort of interfaces and you have a lot of ice push and shove that can hamper or adversely impact the shoreline, or you have large wave that can undermine or wet the toe of the bluff and it starts to spall. Those are bad situations. So you can create a beach as one strategy that moves the water interface lakeward. That's one sort of strategy, and you can see that working in a variety of different situations. If you're a private association and you had a beach that was deep, you can still see that working, and your bluff is probably pretty protected. But once it goes away, in the case of Euclid, that bluff responds extremely fast, meaning in a matter of 3 or 4 months to toe erosion. So on the west side, one strategy could be beach creation. Same on the east, actually. It could be revetment, which is basically a different type of stone and placed along the toe. It could be, there's steel sheeting and there's different ways to tie things back. So some of the, I think, for those who got to see some of it, these are just some examples of what, whether it's stone or whether it's beaches, more like this image that's right here. I think those are primarily the tools I'm imagining. In general, on the west side, the pulling back of the top of bluff isn't too extensive, and in a lot of places there isn't actually capacity or a space to do that. So pulling back the bluff is one option. Generally, landowners don't particularly enjoy that option because that means that they're losing some of their backyard potentially. But that is a strategy as well, and then laying back that bluff and protecting the toe. So it kind of depends upon your geology, but on the west side, we just looked at this for Coon Park in Bay Village. It's a combination of really some very limited bluff pullback, which loses probably 30 feet at the top of the bluff there, if I remember right, and then armoring the toe. You could do this armoring, albeit there's a lot of geological engineering reasons why or geotechnical engineering reasons why you may consider different solutions. But in general, beach, steel, stone, those are kind of your toe protection measures. Jake.
Thank you, Jason. Are the Euclid plans publicly available?
No.
We have a few questions here that wanted to look at the technical specificity of the Euclid drawings.
I'm sure you could get them through the city. What's to see what in particular, Jake? Did they say?
No, they just want to look at the rationale, I'm guessing, for why Euclid was done the way it was done.
Sure. I think beyond, and I'd advise that person to get in contact with the city of Euclid, and they can certainly look at those, and FEMA and regulatory agencies have looked through them. But then the other piece of it, which I think is probably equally interesting, is the easements and agreements that are required. And there's easements and agreements between the homeowners themselves, and then there's the easements and agreements that are assigned with permitting agencies and state agencies for submerged land leases that are equally interesting, I would say, depending upon your specific topic of interest. But if you have a specific concern or question, I guess I'd send that off in the comments to the county, and we can try and answer that.
Okay, well, I think we've worked our way through most of these questions. If anyone has any questions remaining, we have quite a log here. So if I accidentally skipped over any of your questions, please send them again. I did not intentionally look over your question and ignore it.
Yeah, and if we don't get to it tonight, we have a frequently asked question section on the website, and so we're continually adding answers to questions there, both from the private landowners meetings and this meeting. And I know I saw a couple people, if they didn't get to go to the landowners meeting, but they are a landowner, there is a separate survey on our website. So if you're on the website and you look over to Lakefront property owners, there's a separate survey for you as a property owner to take in addition to the just general public survey that will be available tonight.
Sure. And I see some comments that are, they'd like a little bit smaller venue to ask some of the questions that are great. We can try and respond, Mary, like you said, on the website. And I think that, this is a tough thing to answer all the questions and be specific, but be general enough that it applies to many people. So thanks for everybody who spent some time with us tonight. It's really important to get your perspective, like I said, because if we don't have a community interested in this, and in terms of interested in helping define where investment should occur, we really don't have a project. The same way we don't have a project if we don't have landowners who are interested in participating in some way. And so if you look at the FAQs for those who are online right now, or on the meeting right now, and haven't had a chance to do, because they go over some of the questions about property owner rights and the importance of respecting and honoring those, and knowing that this isn't about taking property. This isn't about taking property. This is about looking for opportunity to collaborate. So, but this all starts with this process of giving an opportunity for people to share their perspectives, knowing that it's 30 miles of shoreline, and then it's hard to get down to nitty gritty on all of it at this point. So, anything else, county folks? Mike, would you like to have any sort of closing thoughts or anything else that you'd like for us to hit on?
No, I truly appreciate everyone's participation today on behalf of the County Executive Armin Budish, for joining us, for giving your input. This isn't the end of this public discussion, but we're hoping to try and identify through these public meetings maybe those areas where there is an interest. And I know it's hard to commit right now on anything, but just continue to explore, the website here, or reach out to us down at the county planning or county public works office in regards to maybe your specific property. We'd like to hear more about it. It's a priority of the county executive, so we're eager to try and identify those unique locations or opportunities so we can move forward with them. So I really appreciate your help, and I'm sure Mary and Jim and Jason may have a few more comments.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I know a couple people did ask too if you're part of an HOA or you're part of a neighborhood group or a beach club. We're getting requests to have those meetings, and we'll be following up with everybody. There may be some opportunities to have some smaller group meetings or Zoom meetings, whatever we can do to try and get some input. So definitely reach out to us and stay engaged.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, you can email us directly through the project webpage, and the direct email is info@countyplanning.us.
Outstanding. All right. I will, with that, we actually are going to be right about on time. I'll just throw this up there and again, take the opportunity to give us feedback. We'd love it. And if you're a Lakefront landowner and association member who received that postcard, or maybe you maybe have gone to just the head of the association, just reach out to those in your group. Jake, any other things that we hit on at the end, or we pretty much have a lot of the questions answered?
Yeah, I think we have a vast majority of them answered, and I think that we can, if there are any outstanding, we will post them to the website.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Then I'm going to let everybody go. Appreciate you guys all taking some time tonight, and we'll keep you apprised of things as we move forward.